Halloween tells the tale of a young boy named Michael Myers who murders his sister and escapes custody 15 years later to continue his brand of murderous Halloween havoc. That sounds pretty basic at its core, but to the contrary, there's many layers to pull back in diving into this movie. Filmed in just 20 days in the spring of 1978, loaded down with bags of leaves to replicate fall, the cast and crew delivered the film to Compass International on time and on budget. A budget that was low for 1978 even, of $325,000. Not to worry though, the movie made about $70 million, making it the most financially successful independent horror film up until 1999's Blair Witch Project. Heavily inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and Bob Clark's Black Christmas, Halloween sets out to inspire fear through suspense, not gore. I believe that goal is achieved in no small part by the film's director, co-writer, and score composer, John Carpenter. John's talent is on full display here as we're treated to a nicely paced feature with some amazing cinematography, from the lighting on the antagonist to the Panaglide filmed opening scene. I would be remiss not to mention the film cinematographer Dean Cundey as I talk about those and several other fantastic shots from this movie. Carpenter's visuals aren't the only way of terrifying his audience. His dysrhythmic, tense score is equally unsettling and proves that sometimes less is indeed more. Jamie Lee Curtis stars as Laurie Strode in her very first feature film, and while she's a bit too whiny in the final scenes for my taste, she otherwise gives an outstanding performance for such an early entry in her filmography. With an arc that takes her from bookish and insecure to a fighter who refuses to become another victim, she literally lays the groundwork for the final girl trope. Also starring is Donald Pleasence as Dr. Sam Loomis, yes, one of the many Psycho references in this film. Now in 1978, Donald was already a well-known seasoned actor, serving as a contrast to the otherwise young and relatively inexperienced cast in this film. On set for only 5 days, Donald delivers entrancing lines that do way more than simply provide exposition, as this type of character is typically only good for. He serves as the Captain Ahab of the story, as his obsession with Michael seems to dominate his life well before the events of the film.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Speaking of, I definitely can't talk about Halloween without mentioning the Shape himself. Michael is portrayed by pretty much everyone on the crew, but Nick Castle is the man under the mask most of the time. Nick gives us more of the aforementioned minimalist approach with his performance. With no lines of dialogue, Castle speaks with his movement and mannerisms. Myers is almost played childlike even as an adult, as he sets up what are essentially pranks on his victims before murdering them. Of course, the mask must be mentioned as well. The William Shatner Star Trek mask, the prop department spray-painted white and adjusted some other features to leave this pale, featureless face that we can project our fears onto. No doubt an homage to the film Eyes Without a Face, and every bit as unnerving. Questions are posed of Myers, but none are ever answered, making his mystique grow. What are his motives? Is he human or supernatural? We simply aren't given enough to make a call on these questions, and that's a good thing. We don't see much of him or know much about him, once again reinforcing the less is more approach. Rounding out the rest of the main cast, we have PJ Soles, who gives a totally energetic and fun performance as Laurie's friend Linda. We have Charles Cyphers doing a serviceable job as Sheriff of Haddonfield, Lee Brackett. And then there's Nancy Loomis, who portrays another of Laurie's friends and the daughter of Sheriff Brackett. I'm talking, of course, of Annie Brackett. And unfortunately, her performance is really the only one that leaves anything to be desired for me personally. Is now a good time to bring up that she was dating the film's editor at the time, Tommy Lee Wallace? Shade throwing aside, this movie, although preceded by Peeping Tom, Psycho, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, wrote the blueprint for an entire subgenre. It spawned 11 sequels, remakes, and reboots, with 2 more on the way. A novelization was penned, a game was made for the Atari 2600, comics, and a litany of other merch produced. It's easy to get tied up in how financially successful Halloween was, and sometimes forget just how well made it is, especially for a young cast and crew. It's simple, yet effective, and eerily realistic when perhaps it shouldn't be. This is achieved in no small part due to co-writer Deborah Hill's lived experience as a young female babysitter from a small town. Expertly shot, lit, and scored, Halloween sets a bar that I believe only a select few have ever touched. It's the quintessential slasher film, and if you haven't seen it, you're doing yourself an injustice. Remedy that. It's not just my favorite slasher, it's not just my favorite horror movie, it is my favorite film of all time. On a scale of 1 to 5 scars, I give Halloween a perfect 5-star rating.